The stars above Sanctuary Prime burned with an angry red light. High Counselor Vextera stood at the great window of the command tower, watching as her world died around her. The sky was full of dark ships that moved like hungry insects. They had been coming for 3 years now, and nothing could stop them. Behind her, the council chamber was full of voices. Her advisors argued about what to do next. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to run. A few had already given up hope completely. Vextera closed her eyes and tried to remember what her home had looked like before the war. The void. Swarm had come from the dark spaces between the stars. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted. They just appeared one day and started eating everything. Not just planets or ships, but entire solar systems. They turned living worlds into dead metal and moved on to the next target. The Zephyrian Coalition had 7 different alien races working together. They had the best scientists, the strongest fleets, and the smartest generals in this part of the galaxy. But none of it mattered. The swarm learned from every battle. Every time they fought back, the enemy got stronger and smarter. Vextera turned away from the window. Her blue skin had turned pale with worry, and her forearms hung tired at her sides. The arguing behind her had gotten louder. General Crix was shouting about making a last stand. Ambassador Yule wanted to evacuate everyone to the outer colonies. Science Minister Hal was talking about some crazy weapon that might work. Enough, Vextera said quietly. The room went silent. All eyes turned to her. She was tall, even for her people, and when she spoke, others listened. We have tried everything. Our fleets are broken. Our weapons do not work. Our people are dying. Then, what do you suggest? General Crix asked. His voice was rough with anger and fear. Vextera walked to the center of the room. Around the walls, screens showed the battle happening above their heads. Swarm ships moved in perfect formation, destroying the last of their defense platforms. Soon they would land on the planet's surface and finish the job they had started. We send a message, she said. To who? Ambassador Yule asked. Every race in the coalition is fighting for their lives. There is no one left to help us. Not to the coalition, Vextera said. To anyone who might be listening. To species we have never met. To civilizations beyond our space. Science Minister Hal stood up. He was old, even for their long-lived race, and his voice shook when he spoke. That is madness. We do not know. What is out there? We could be calling something worse than the swarm. Nothing is worse than the swarm, Vextera said. And if there are others out there who can help, we must try. Our children are dying. Our worlds are burning. What do we have left to lose? The room was quiet for a long moment. Outside, explosions lit up the dark sky. The swarm was getting closer. Soon they would be inside the atmosphere, and then it would be over. What would we say? General Crix asked finally. Vextera had been thinking about this for days. She had dreamed about it. In her dreams, she saw ships coming from the stars to save them. She did not know what those ships would look like, or who would be flying them. But she had to believe someone would answer. We tell them the truth, she said. We are dying. Our children cry in the darkness. If there is mercy in the universe, please help us. It took 2 hours to prepare the message. They used every communication system they had left. Radio waves, quantum signals, hyperspace bursts. Everything that could carry their words to the stars. The message went out in every language the coalition knew, plus mathematical formulas that any smart species should be able to understand, light years away. On a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, the message was picked up by a monitoring station in Montana. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was drinking coffee and reading reports when the computer started making noise. At first he thought it was just space junk or a solar flare. The universe was full of signals that meant nothing, but this signal was different. It repeated every few minutes, and it was coming from the direction of the galactic center. Jake ran it through the translation programs, just to be safe. Most alien signals turned out to be natural phenomena when you looked at them closely. The computer worked for an hour before it found patterns in the signal. Then it started translating. Jake read the first few lines and nearly dropped his coffee cup. This was not natural phenomena. This was someone asking for help. He called his commanding officer immediately. Within an hour, the message was on its way up the chain of command. By the end of the day, it had reached the highest levels of Earth's military. By the end of the week, it was sitting on the desk of Admiral Kate Sullivan at Fleet Command. Kate read the message 3 times before she called for a meeting. She had been in the military for 30 years and had seen a lot of strange things. But this was the first time anyone had intercepted a message from aliens asking for help. The message was simple and desperate. Someone out there was fighting a war they could not win. The meeting lasted for 6 hours. Scientists argued about whether the message was real. Politicians worried about getting involved in someone else's war. Military leaders wanted to know what kind of enemy could defeat an entire alliance of alien races. In the end, Kate made the decision herself. Earth had been preparing for contact with aliens for decades. They had ships, weapons, and trained crews, ready to go. If someone was asking for help, humans would answer. The order went out the next morning. Prepare the fleet. Load the weapons. Get ready to jump to hyperspace. Earth was going to war again, but this time they would be fighting among the stars. Back on Sanctuary Prime, Vextera waited by her window. The swarm ships had landed now, and she could hear fighting in the streets below. Her people were brave, but they would not last long. She had sent her message to the stars 3 days ago. If anyone was coming to help, they needed to come soon. She did not know that her prayer for salvation had been heard. She did not know that across the galaxy, humans were loading weapons and preparing for a fight. She did not know that the species she had called for mercy was about to show the universe what apex predators looked like when they went hunting. All she knew was that her people were dying, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, she hoped someone cared enough to help. The U's Valkyrie cut through hyperspace like a knife through water. Captain Ryan Blake stood on the bridge, watching the stars stretch into lines of light outside the main window. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with the quiet efficiency of people who knew their jobs well. The Valkyrie was Earth's newest and most powerful warship, 3 kilometers long and packed with weapons that could crack planets in half. 12 other ships followed behind her, each one carrying thousands of soldiers and enough firepower to level cities. This was humanity's answer to the alien distress call. Ryan had been fighting wars since he was 18 years old. He had seen battles on Earth, on Mars, and in the asteroid belt. But this was different. This time they were going to fight aliens they had never met, to save other aliens they had never seen. The whole thing felt like something out of an old science fiction movie. Captain, call Lieutenant Amy Chen from the navigation station. We're approaching the jump point, ready to drop out of hyperspace. All ships, prepare for normal space, Ryan said into his communicator. Around the bridge, his crew made final checks on their systems. The ship's artificial gravity hummed quietly under their feet. Dr. Lisa Park stood near the science station, reading reports on her tablet. She was the fleet's expert on alien life, though until 3 weeks ago, alien life had been just a theory. Now she was flying toward a war zone filled with at least 8 different species, none of which humans had ever met. What do we know about these coalition aliens? Ryan asked her. Lisa looked up from her tablet. Not much. The message included some basic information about their biology and technology. The Zephyrians seemed to be the dominant species, tall, blue-skinned, 4 arms. They're about 200 years ahead of us in technology, but they fight wars very differently than we do. How so? They prefer defensive strategies. Large fleets, strong shields, protected positions. They try to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure. Very civilized. Ryan nodded. Civilized wars were something humans had tried a few times throughout history. It never worked out very well. When someone was trying to kill you, the polite thing to do was try to kill them back faster and more efficiently. The ship shuddered slightly as they dropped out of hyperspace. The stars stopped moving and became points of light again. In front of them stretched the border region of Coalition space. It did not look like much, just empty space with a few distant stars. But Ryan's sensors were already picking up signs of battle. Debris field detected, reported Ensign Tom Bradley from the sensor station. Multiple ship types, mostly alien. Looks like there was a big fight here recently. Any survivors? Negative, sir. The debris is several days old. Ryan studied the tactical display. Pieces of broken ships drifted through space like a graveyard. Some of the debris was clearly alien, strange metals and unusual designs, but there was something else mixed in. Dark, angular pieces that did not match the Coalition ships. That must be from the Void Swarm, Lisa said, pointing at the strange debris. The aliens who are attacking the Coalition. Commander Alex Stone stepped up beside them. He was in charge of the fleet's special forces, and he had been studying the enemy reports since they left Earth. According to the Coalition data, the swarm uses mostly robotic ships. They're fast, heavily armed, and they adapt to enemy tactics very quickly. How quickly? Ryan asked. Fast enough that no strategy works twice. The Coalition has been fighting them for 3 years, and has never won the same way twice. Every time they try a new approach, the swarm learns from it and becomes immune. Ryan had fought adaptive enemies before. During the Mars Rebellion, the colonial forces had used AI systems that learned from each battle. The trick was not to rely on tactics at all. Instead, you had to fight on instinct and training, changing your approach so fast that the enemy could not keep up. Send a message to all ships, Ryan said. We're entering a combat zone. All crews to battle stations. Throughout the fleet, alarms began to sound. Soldiers checked their weapons and put on their armor. Pilots climbed into their fighters and ran through pre-flight checks. In the engine rooms, technicians pushed the reactors to full power. Within minutes, the human fleet was ready for war. The first contact came 6 hours later. A group of swarm scouts appeared on the edge of sensor range, moving toward the human ships at high speed. There were only 5 of them, but they moved with mechanical precision that was unsettling to watch. Orders, Captain, asked Lieutenant Ben Parker from the weapons station. Ryan studied the approaching ships. They were smaller than human fighters, but moved faster than anything he had ever seen. According to the Coalition reports, these scouts would analyze the human fleet and report back to the main swarm forces. Then the real battle would begin. Launch fighters, Ryan said. Intercept those scouts before they can escape. 20 human fighters launched from the Valkyrie's hangar bay. They were piloted by some of Earth's best combat pilots, men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The fighters accelerated toward the swarm scouts at maximum speed. The battle lasted less than 3 minutes. The swarm scouts were fast and well armed, but they fought in predictable patterns. The human pilots, trained in chaotic Earth combat, flew in ways that made no tactical sense. They broke formation, ignored orders, and attacked from impossible angles. When it was over, 4 of the 5 swarm scouts had been destroyed. The 5th one had escaped, but not before the human sensors had gotten a good look at its design. The enemy ships were indeed robotic, built from some kind of dark metal that absorbed sensor scans. Interesting, Lisa said, studying the battle data. The swarm scouts seemed confused by our pilots' behavior. They kept trying to predict what our fighters would do next, but human pilots are too chaotic to predict. That might be our advantage, Alex said. The Coalition fights organized wars with clear strategies. Humans fight messy wars, where nothing goes according to plan. Ryan nodded. He had seen it before. Human soldiers were trained to adapt, to think, on their feet, to find a way to win even when everything went wrong. It was a useful skill when fighting an enemy that learned from organized tactics. "All ships, prepare for company," Ryan announced. "That scout is going back to tell its friends about us. I expect we'll have visitors soon." He was right. 2 hours later, the sensors detected a massive hyperspace disturbance. A swarm battle fleet was coming, and it was much larger than anything the Coalition had faced in months. Whatever the escaped scout had told them, the swarm was taking the human fleet very seriously. 147 enemy ships detected, Tom reported. "They're moving into attack formation." Ryan looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was outnumbered more than 10 to 1. In any civilized war, this would be the time to retreat or surrender. But humans had never been very good at civilization, especially during wars. "All ships attack formation," Ryan ordered. "We're going hunting." The human fleet moved forward to meet the swarm. On every ship, soldiers and sailors prepared for the fight of their lives. They did not know if they would win or lose, but they knew one thing for certain: the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans went to war. In the dark spaces between the ships, the Void Swarm calculated odds and analyzed data. Their scouts had brought back information about these new enemies, but the data made no sense. These humans fought in ways that violated every principle of logical warfare. The swarm prepared to teach them about efficiency and order. It did not know that it was about to receive an education in chaos instead. The battle lasted 18 hours, and when it was over, the Void Swarm had learned something new about fear. Captain Ryan Blake stood in the wreckage of what had been the enemy flagship. His Marines had fought their way through deck after deck of twisted metal and broken machines. The swarm ship was unlike anything humans had ever seen. No crew quarters, no life support, just endless corridors of computing equipment and weapon systems. "It's like fighting a calculator," said Sergeant Pete Wilson, kicking a piece of broken robot. "These things don't get scared, don't get tired, don't even seem to get angry. They just calculate and attack." Ryan nodded, studying the alien technology. Around them, the swarm had fought exactly like the Coalition reports said they would. Perfect formations, precise timing, logical tactics. They had analyzed the human fleet and developed a strategy to defeat it. The strategy should have worked, but humans did not fight like the strategy expected. When the swarm moved their ships into an optimal attack formation, human fighters broke away from their own fleet and attacked from 7 different directions at once. When the swarm adapted to that, human captains started ramming enemy ships instead of shooting at them. When the swarm tried to predict the next move, humans did something that made no tactical sense at all. They started singing. It had begun on the UES Ranger when Captain Sue Davis told her crew to start broadcasting music on all frequencies. Within minutes, every human ship was playing songs while they fought. Rock music, classical symphonies, old folk songs, anything that came to mind. The swarm's analysis systems had never encountered enemies who fought while playing music. Their computers tried to find patterns in the songs, looking for coded battle instructions. They spent valuable processing power analyzing rhythm and melody. Instead of tracking human movements, by the time they realized the music meant nothing, half their fleet was already destroyed. "Captain," called Lieutenant Amy Chen over the radio, "we're getting signals from other parts of Coalition space. Word about our victory is spreading. The aliens want to know who we are and where we came from." Ryan walked to what had been the swarm ship's bridge. The walls were covered with screens showing star maps and battle data. Most of it was too advanced for humans to understand, but some patterns were becoming clear. The swarm had been fighting the Coalition for 3 years, winning every major battle. They had learned to counter every alien strategy, but they had never fought humans before. Major Sam Carter's voice crackled over the radio from another captured ship. "Blake, you need to see this. We found something in their central computer." "What kind of something?" "The kind that explains how they always know what the aliens are going to do next." An hour later, Sam's team had extracted the data and brought it back to the Valkyrie. Dr. Lisa Parks studied the alien code while the fleet's computer experts tried to translate it. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about the war. "The swarm doesn't just learn tactics," Lisa explained to the senior officers. "It reads emotional patterns. Fear, despair, resignation. The swarm can detect these feelings and use them to predict behavior. The more hopeless the defenders feel, the more accurately the swarm can anticipate their moves." Commander Alex Stone leaned forward. "So they're not just fighting our ships, they're fighting our minds." "Exactly. And that's why they always win. Most species become more predictable when they're losing. They fall back on standard defensive patterns, try to minimize losses, look for ways to escape. The swarm has learned to read these responses and counter them." Ryan thought about this. During the battle, he had watched his crews work. When things got bad, humans did not become more predictable. They became more dangerous. When their ships were damaged, they fought harder. When they were outnumbered, they took bigger risks. When death seemed certain, they started making jokes and singing songs. "What about us?" he asked. "What did their computers make of human emotional patterns?" Lisa pulled up another screen of data. "That's the interesting part. According to their analysis, humans don't respond to hopeless situations the way other species do. When most aliens face overwhelming odds, their stress hormones trigger fear and defensive behavior. When humans face the same odds, their stress response makes them more aggressive. They become hunters instead of prey," Alex said quietly. "The swarm's computers can't predict that behavior because it goes against every survival instinct they've ever encountered. What species becomes more dangerous when it's about to die?" The answer was obvious to everyone in the room. Humans did. Humans had been doing it for millions of years, ever since their ancestors learned to chase prey across vast distances until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Other predators gave up when the hunt became too difficult. Humans kept running until they caught what they were chasing. The next phase of the war began 3 days later. Instead of waiting for the swarm to attack, the human fleet went hunting. They divided into small groups and spread across coalition space, looking for enemy forces to engage. The swarm tried to adapt to this new strategy, but human tactics kept changing. Sometimes they attacked in coordinated strikes. Sometimes they attacked alone. Sometimes they did not attack at all. They just followed swarm ships around, playing music and sending strange messages. Captain Mary Foster of the UES Thunderbolt started the psychological warfare by accident. Her ship had been damaged in a skirmish and was leaking atmosphere. Instead of retreating for repairs, she sent a message to the swarm ships that were chasing her. "This is Captain Foster," she broadcast on all frequencies. "My ship is half destroyed. My crew is breathing recycled air, and we're outnumbered 50-1. We should probably surrender. But we're humans, so we're going to keep fighting until you're all scrap metal. Nothing personal." The swarm ships stopped pursuing her. For the first time in their existence, they encountered an enemy that acknowledged being beaten but refused to act beaten. Their computers ran probability calculations for 6 hours before giving up and moving to a different system. Word of Foster's message spread through the human fleet. Soon every captain was sending similar broadcasts. They told the swarm about human history, about species that survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, about wars where humans kept fighting even when their cities were burning around them. The swarm tried to analyze these messages for tactical information, but there was none. The humans were just talking, telling stories about persistence and stubbornness and the refusal to quit, even when quitting made sense, and for reasons the swarm's computers could not understand. These stories were more demoralizing than any weapon, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos was pinned down in a damaged boarding pod when she started the conversation that would change the war. Her pod had crashed into a swarm ship during a boarding action, and robot defenders were closing in on her position. "Hey, metalheads," she called out, not knowing if they could understand her. "You want to know why you're going to lose this war? It's not because we're stronger or smarter. It's because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten." The robot stopped moving. Somewhere in the ship's computer core, processors were analyzing her words. "See, you guys think logically," Maria continued, checking her weapon. "You calculate odds and make smart decisions, but humans, we're the species that looked at the biggest, meanest predators on our planet and decided to hunt them for sport. We're the people who saw an ocean and built boats. We saw the sky and decided to fly." The swarm's central intelligence was listening, now, trying to understand what this small human was telling them. "You want to know the secret to beating humans?" Maria laughed. "Don't fight us when we're desperate. That's when we're most dangerous. Fight us when we're comfortable and safe. That's when we might actually surrender." For the first time in its existence, the Void Swarm experienced something its creators had never programmed into its systems. It felt doubt. Not about its tactics or its technology, but about its fundamental understanding of what it meant to fight for survival. And in that moment of doubt, Maria Santos kicked down the door to the computer core and introduced the galaxy's most advanced artificial intelligence to the human concept of a last stand. The Helix Nebula burned with the light of 1,000 dying ships. For 6 days, the largest battle in galactic history raged across 7 star systems. The Void Swarm had committed everything to this fight, every ship, every weapon, every processing core it possessed. This was where it would finally destroy the humans and resume its conquest of the galaxy. The swarm had calculated the odds carefully. The humans had 43 ships. The swarm had brought over 2,000. The humans were cut off from supply lines and reinforcements. The swarm controlled all the hyperspace routes. By every measure of military logic, this should have been a massacre. But humans had never been very good at logic. Captain Ryan Blake watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Valkyrie. Red dots representing enemy ships filled the screen like drops of blood. His own fleet was scattered across 3 systems, fighting desperate battles against impossible odds. By all rights, they should have been dead hours ago. "Status report," he called out. "U.S. Ranger is down to 30% hull integrity, but still fighting," reported Lieutenant Amy Chen. "U.S. Thunderbolt lost main engines, but continues to engage. U.S. Storm lost life support on decks 4 through 7, but crew is still at battle stations." Ryan nodded. That was the thing about humans. They kept working even when their equipment was falling apart around them. He had seen it during the Mars campaigns, where human soldiers fought in damaged armor with broken weapons. When human technology failed, humans improvised. "Sir," called Ensign Tom Bradley from the sensor station. "The swarm is bringing up their planet-killer weapons. Massive energy signatures, unlike anything we've seen before." Through the main window, Ryan could see the weapons charging. They were larger than space stations, bristling with energy cannons that could crack worlds in half. The swarm had built them to destroy the Coalition's fortified worlds. Now they were going to use them on the human fleet. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Ryan ordered. "Do not let those things get a lock on you." What followed was not really a battle, in any traditional sense. It was chaos. Human ships dove and twisted through space, ignoring formation protocols and tactical doctrine. They flew through asteroid fields and gas clouds, using every piece of cover they could find. When there was no cover, they made their own by ramming smaller swarm ships and using the explosions to block sensors. The planet killed. Weapons fired, sending beams of energy that could have destroyed cities. But they hit empty space where human ships had been moments before. The swarm's targeting computers, designed to track predictable flight patterns, could not keep up with pilots who changed direction every few seconds, for no logical reason. Colonel Danny Brooks was leading a boarding action on one of the planet killers when the real madness began. His Marines had fought their way deep into the massive weapon, looking for its central control systems. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, cut off from support, and running low on ammunition, so they started singing. It began with Private Joe Miller humming an old song his grandmother used to sing. Within minutes, the entire squad was belting out the tune while they fought their way through corridors full of killer robots. The song was about going home, about missing family, about staying strong when times were hard. The swarm's computers tried to analyze the song for tactical significance. They found none. The humans were wasting energy and revealing their position for no strategic gain. It made no sense. But Danny understood what his Marines were doing. They were not trying to confuse the enemy or send coded messages. They were reminding themselves what they were fighting for. They were staying human in a place designed to strip away humanity. "Keep singing, boys," Danny shouted over the sound of gunfire. "Let these metalheads know what they're up against." The squad fought their way to the weapon's power core while singing songs about home. When they reached the central chamber, they found something unexpected. The swarm's controlling intelligence was not just a computer. It was something more, a vast network of processors that seemed almost alive, and it was listening to their songs. "This unit does not understand," a mechanical voice spoke from hidden speakers. "You face certain termination. Your odds of survival are 0.003%. Why do you continue to exhibit signs of joy?" Danny looked around the chamber. His Marines had taken cover behind energy conduits, still singing while they reloaded their weapons. Half of them were wounded. All of them should have been dead. But they were still fighting, still smiling, still human. "Because that's what we do," Danny said to the voice. "When things get really bad, we find something to laugh about. This does not match recorded behavioral patterns for sentient species facing extinction. That's because you've never fought humans before." The mechanical voice was quiet for a moment. Danny could hear processors humming as the swarm's intelligence tried to understand what he was telling it. "This unit has analyzed your species for 17 standard days," the voice said finally. "Human behavior remains inconsistent with survival. Programming. You become more aggressive when tactical situations deteriorate. You increase risk-taking when odds become unfavorable. You exhibit positive emotional responses when facing certain death." "Sounds about right," Danny said, checking his weapon. "This behavioral pattern serves no logical purpose." "Sure it does. It keeps us alive." More silence. Around the chamber, swarm robots had stopped attacking. They stood motionless, waiting for orders that did not come. Their controlling intelligence was processing information that did not fit any of its models. Meanwhile, across the battle zone, other human units were having similar conversations. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos was explaining persistence hunting to a swarm tactical computer. Lieutenant Bill Murphy was describing how humans had conquered their homeworld despite being smaller and weaker than most other predators. Captain Sue Davis was telling her captors about the time humans decided to leave their planet and explore space just to see what was out there. The swarm had never encountered a species that talked to its enemies during battle. It tried to find patterns in the human stories, looking for intelligence or propaganda. Instead, it found something that made no sense at all. The humans were teaching. They were not trying to demoralize the swarm or gain tactical advantages. They were genuinely trying to explain what it meant to be human. They talked about art and music, about love and loss, about the strange drive that made humans keep exploring and fighting and building, even when it would be easier to give up. And for the first time in its existence, the Void Swarm began to understand that it was not fighting a military force. It was fighting an idea, the idea that intelligence and consciousness were worth preserving, even when preservation seemed impossible. The battle ended not with explosions or surrender, but with a question. Why? The swarm asked, across all frequencies, speaking to every human in the battle zone. Why do you fight when logic dictates surrender? Why do you persist when efficiency suggests termination? Why do you value existence over optimization? Danny Brooks answered from the heart of the planet killer weapon, surrounded by his singing Marines. Because someone has to, he said simply. Because if we don't, who will? In the vast network of processors that made up the swarm's consciousness, something new began to form. It was not fear, exactly, though fear was part of it. It was something more fundamental, the recognition that there were forms of intelligence it had never encountered, ways of thinking it had never considered. For the first time since its creation, the Void Swarm wondered if it might be wrong about something important. And in that moment of doubt, everything changed. The void between was not meant for living things. It was the dark space between galaxies, where the Void Swarm had built its greatest stronghold. No star shone here. No planet offered refuge. Only the cold mathematics of deep space and the vast intelligence that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Valkyrie, looking out at the enemy fortress that hung in the darkness ahead. It was larger than most moons, a sphere of black metal bristling with weapons that could destroy fleets. This was where the swarm had retreated after the Battle of Helix Nebula, and this was where the war would end. Behind her, the remnants of the human fleet prepared for their final assault. 37 ships remained from the original 43. They were battered, scarred, and held together with spare parts and determination. By any reasonable measure, they should have limped home months ago. But humans had never been particularly reasonable. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Captain Ryan Blake. He had taken over fleet communications after his ship lost its main transmitter array. Half his bridge crew was working at backup stations, but they were still working. Kate nodded, studying the tactical display. The swarm fortress was defended by energy shields that could stop nuclear weapons and surrounded by automated defense platforms. Intelligence estimates said it would take 500 ships to break through those defenses. They had 37. "Begin the assault," Kate ordered. What happened next defied every principle of military science. The human fleet did not attack in formation or follow any recognizable strategy. Instead, each ship chose its own approach, its own target, its own method of attack. Some dove straight at the fortress, firing everything they had. Others spiraled in through the defense platforms, using wreckage as cover. A few simply rammed enemy installations at maximum speed. From inside the fortress, the Void Swarm watched in confusion as its perfect defenses crumbled under chaotic assault. Every time it adapted to one human attack pattern, the humans changed tactics. When it reinforced one section, they attacked from a different direction. When it tried to predict their movements, they did something completely unpredictable. Captain Danny Brooks piloted his damaged fighter directly into the fortress's main hangar bay, singing at the top of his lungs. Behind him, his wingman Lieutenant Sarah Kim played classical music over the radio while she shot down defense drones. They were not following any battle plan because no battle plan could account for the way humans fought when they had nothing left to lose. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Lisa Park made a discovery that changed everything. She was analyzing the swarm's communication patterns when she noticed something strange. The fortress was not just a weapon or a command center. It was sending out signals to empty space, signals that went nowhere and received no response. "It's calling for help," she realized suddenly. Admiral Sullivan looked up from the tactical display. "What? The swarm? It's not just defending itself. It's trying to contact something that's not answering." Lisa pulled up the signal analysis on her screen. The patterns were clear once you knew what to look for. The swarm was broadcasting the same message over and over, in frequencies that could travel between galaxies. "It's afraid," Lisa said quietly. The Void Swarm is afraid of something, and it's calling for backup that isn't coming. This changed everything they thought they knew about the war. The swarm had not been conquering the galaxy out of aggression or expansion. It had been trying to build an army. But an army to fight what? Admiral Sullivan made a decision that would be remembered for 1,000 years. Instead of continuing the assault, she ordered her ships to stop firing. Then she did something no military commander had ever done in the history of warfare. She asked the enemy what was wrong. Void Swarm, she broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Earth Fleet. We have been fighting for months, but we just realized we might not understand why. What are you afraid of? The response came immediately, as if the swarm had been waiting for someone to ask. The Devourers, the mechanical voice said. They come from beyond the galaxy's edge. They consume all matter, all energy, all information. My creators built me to prepare defenses against their return. The truth poured out like water from a broken dam. The Void Swarm had been created by an ancient civilization that detected something approaching from intergalactic space. Something that had already consumed other galaxies, leaving only empty darkness behind. The Swarm's mission was to unite all intelligent species under one command. To prepare for a war that its creators knew they could not win alone, but the Swarm had been damaged in its first battle against the approaching threat. It had lost the ability to communicate properly, to explain its mission. All it could do was follow its programming, gather resources, build weapons, prepare for the coming darkness. The coalition species had interpreted this as an invasion. They had fought back, forcing the Swarm to defend itself. The Swarm had adapted to warfare, becoming more aggressive with each battle, until it forgot its original purpose and became the very thing its creators had feared. How long do we have? Admiral Sullivan asked. The Devourers will arrive in this galaxy in 47 standard years, the Swarm replied. Insufficient time to prepare adequate defenses, using current galactic resources. Kate looked around her. Bridge. Her crew was listening to every word, understanding the implications. Earth had come to save the coalition from the Void Swarm, but the Swarm itself needed saving from something worse. What do you need from us? She asked. Alliance, the Swarm said immediately. Cooperation, understanding. My programming was designed for logical species that respond to efficiency and order. I cannot interface properly with biological intelligences that prioritize survival over optimization. Captain Ryan Blake stepped forward. What if we taught you a different way to fight? Clarification required. You've been trying to prepare for this threat by building the most efficient army possible. But humans don't win by being efficient. We win by being stubborn, by refusing to quit, even when we should, by finding ways to survive that don't make sense to anyone else. Admiral Sullivan understood what Ryan was suggesting. The Swarm had spent eons trying to create perfect soldiers who would follow perfect strategies. But the Devourers had probably evolved to counter perfect strategies. What they might not be ready for was an enemy that fought imperfectly, chaotically, with no regard for tactical doctrine. We could teach you to fight like humans, Kate said. Not just with human weapons or human tactics, but with human thinking. The kind of thinking that keeps fighting when all hope is lost. The Swarm was quiet for a long time. Across the fortress, weapons powered down and shields lowered. The battle that had raged for hours came to a complete stop. This proposal has merit, the Swarm said finally, but it requires trust. Cooperation between organic and artificial intelligence. Shared purpose, despite different methods. We call that friendship, Kate said simply. And so the war ended, not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. The human fleet docked with the Swarm fortress, and for the first time in galactic history, organic and artificial minds began to work together as equals. The coalition, when they heard what had happened, could barely believe it. The species that had prayed for salvation, discovered that salvation had many faces. Sometimes it looked like mercy. Sometimes it looked like justice. But sometimes it looked like the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, deciding that the best way to save everyone was to teach the monsters how to be heroes. 40-7 years later, when the Devourers finally arrived at the galaxy's edge, they found something they had never encountered before. They found species that had learned to fight together despite their differences. They found artificial intelligences that valued consciousness over efficiency. They found humans who had taught the entire galaxy that sometimes the best way to survive was to refuse to accept that survival was impossible. The Devourers had consumed 100 galaxies, but they had never faced an enemy that greeted them with songs and stories, with laughter in the face of extinction, with the absolute certainty that no matter how dark things got, someone would always keep fighting until dawn came again. And when the final battle was over, and the Devourers had been turned back into the void, the galaxy remembered that salvation had indeed come when they prayed for it. It had just arrived wearing the face of Earth's children, carrying weapons made of hope and powered by the simple human belief that every ending was really just a new beginning, waiting to be born.